The view is that everything is co-arising, interconnected. One cannot be insular, cannot operate unilaterally. I noticed in this Sunday New York Times Magazine, the theme this week was doing well, doing good, doing time. And there were articles such as when a rich man goes to jail, the immortality of investors, do white-collar convictions make us happy, who cheats and why, and articles on the, quote, ethics of shopping, the ethics of high-end dining, the ethics of going bankrupt, etc. So, why a po-ethics? I mean, the problem I think in this country is that it's such a business operation, and you travel to other cultures and places. I remember being in Nicaragua, and there's some value to being a worker of words, to being a dreamer and an imaginative person, although that country has fallen on incredibly hard times because of the U.S. engagement and shackling there. Anyway, how to speak of this? How does art respond to the hegemony of empire building, to popular culture, to media? How is our art to be in the world? And to make it, do we need to hide? Do we have to go underground, lay low, keep a low profile, go back into a kind of safe cocoon, get depressed, get high, unplug, constantly write, raging text? I mean, it's so hard daily to deal with the kind of emotions, at least I'm speaking personally, the kind of rage and outrage, actually. But many of the folk here, including all this community, many of the students I've spoken to are teachers, cultural activists, archivists, scholars, doctors, and are putting energy into supporting one another, supporting alternative communities, alternative imaginative projects, and in this idea, this ethics of taking back the language, of being able to invent and reinvent and translate and so on, and play with it all. We form our own collectives, and there's a loyalty and a kind of vow to imagination and language. Avant-gardism has questioned the very role of art in a bourgeois society. Art has been produced by isolated communities, by isolated individuals, associated with elitism. And how do we reconfigure this or think about this? And I'll leave you with a quote from the literary critic, Frederick Jameson, and he says, "The only authentic cultural production today," and this was written some years back, within probably a decade ago, has seemed to be that which can draw on the collective experience of marginal pockets of the social life of the world system. Black literature and blues, British working class rock, women's literature, gay literature, the roman Québécois, the literature of the third world. And this production is possible only to the degree to which these forms of collective life or collective solidarity have not yet been fully penetrated by the market and the commodity system. I'll leave you with that, and I wanted to invite Jack to begin. Jack has done a lot of work locally and has also worked extensively outside the market and commodity system, and has also worked with other species and studied and come to, I think, a deeper understanding of the hope not, but somewhat vanishing natural. Jack Collins.
Thanks, Anne. Ethics. Sanskrit roots, sva da. I don't know how to pronounce them, but sva da. Self to place. Place yourself, according to my Keats. Also, self-will and strength has a lot to do with the roots of our understanding of the word. In a sense, ethics means exerting oneself contrary to nature, fighting off temptation, jumping up out of sleep and sloth, restraining oneself. There's a sense in which nature is all crammed in the instant, and to think of time, of good, to be ethical, is possibly, just to think of it this way, hubristic, is to go against impulse, against gravity, against nature. but then it's natural to counter nature. Interesting subspecies of the ethics question. Poets tend, I think, to go for the gesture and to ally themselves with feeding, capital F. Could this tendency put them at odds with the bloodless seeming plans, capital P, of ethics for selfish reasons? Because you look good being gestural. Because you look good being all warm and poetical. If you work at your art intensely and honestly, what could be more ethical than that? What could ever do more good than the continuation of bringing what Gary Snyder calls the richly interconnected, interdependent, and incredibly complex character of wild ecosystems into the culture? Good poetry, regardless of content, is intrinsically nutrition for language and mind, thus nutrition for life. What could be more moral than frequent surprise? Perhaps ethics means you place yourself, but then everything moves on you. The moral duty of an artist is to make and perhaps disseminate images and moves that advance thought. So what about the ethics of propaganda, of expressivity itself? Is it proper to color language? Can there be falsification for the sake of truth? I say yes, if we take truth to exist, but to always be in partial embryo or disintegration states, like the word nature is. In other words, sort of. In other words, talk as well as you can, but if you then find yourself leading a country, pause and take stock, ethically. In other words, when the scientists try for objectivity, that's okay, but they shouldn't ever think they've made it or could. In other words, ethics is to keep on dividing the remaining distance into halves, unless you're a xenophobic. Ethics is the particulars of a general theory of good, or even spelling of good. Ethics could be quitting smoking because you respect yourself biologically enough to do what's possible to continue your work. Or it could be keeping on smoking because you feel a value in going contrary to sheer quantity. So it's like poetry itself. It certainly depends on uncertainty. It's composed of contradictions, but if you take that as a key, you've lost it. Hauling